Tonight, we are tracing our thoughts back to the roots, the fourth skillful sign in the Buddha's Vitakasantana Sutta, the relaxation of thoughts. But before we do that, I wanted to clarify something that I said earlier, because I mentioned that this series is designed to be used during meditation, particularly, but that we can also use it at any time. Right, anytime we are facing a less than skillful thought. Our partner says something, our child, our boss, and we get triggered. And before we start getting entangled in that bramble, we can apply one of these signs and switch gears. I mean, these are really designed to interrupt the momentum, the energy of the story, so that we can turn to something that will help us, right? And that will benefit us in that moment, the other person, that will benefit the situation. And this is true. This is true. But there's a subtlety here, because someone asked me, if someone says something and I notice myself getting angry, isn't switching or ignoring the thought a form of avoidance? Because I understand that ultimately there's no one to become angry, that the one who is angry has no self-nature. And the same is true of the thought. But in that moment, I'm angry or hurt or sad. And those emotions are real and they're affecting me. And so I don't want to just ignore them. Right? Yes. And so we have to, or I would like us to be very clear about what this teaching is saying and what it's not saying. Because sometimes I think we do here switch the thought, ignore the thought, chop the thought at its root, and we really hear that thought is not important. That thought is not worth your attention or your energy. And if you get angry, that's not important either, because those feelings are empty and you are empty. So just, let it go. No one says that outright, but I think it can be the subtext, or it can be the implication, what we infer, actually, from such a teaching. And of course, that's not what it's saying at all. Certainly not what the Buddha was saying. And so these 5 signs are in no way negating the validity of our thoughts, of our emotions, of sensations. If we're in pain, for example. What they're doing is getting us to cut through the content of the thought, of the emotion, so we can get to the other side, which is the realization that when the thought disappears, the thinker disappears. That neither thought nor thinker, or feeling and feeler, are as fixed and as immovable as I often take them to be, and that they are not separate. That's really the most important thing. Right? So if a feeling arises, a thought arises, it's there, it is real. But it doesn't exist independently. So it's not just the self isn't real and therefore you shouldn't be hurt or offended. Is that this self that is hurt or offended in that moment is not apart from everything else that is happening there and everywhere. The thought and the thinker are conditioned, in other words. They're interdependent, mutually arising. When this is, that comes to be. When this is not, this does not arise. Which means thought has no power other than the one I give it. And I know I'm repeating myself, but I just want to be very clear that thoughts are not a problem, just as feelings are not a problem. And so at the level of conventional truth, we face the thought, we acknowledge we have it, we acknowledge the feeling, and we do whatever we need to do to respond to it well. Maybe that means going to therapy with your partner so you can work through the dynamics that are getting in the way of a more harmonious relationship. Maybe it means quitting your job because your boss is intractable and staying in that environment would be toxic. right? So it doesn't preclude us from taking action, from being very practical if that is what is needed. And at the level of ultimate truth, we see there is no thought and no thinker apart from one another. Which, when we really understand this, gives us a whole new perspective on those thoughts and, of course, on ourselves. That's the whole point in the end of a practice such as this, to see into the unconditioned, to see that which does not change with our moods, with our likes and dislikes, does not depend on what somebody else says or does. So the point is to be completely free to pick up a thought or to put it down, depending on what is needed. Because otherwise, we're just spending all our time managing our thoughts, our feelings, instead of getting to the point where we can be free of the energy that binds us, the energy of greed, anger, and delusion. Right? Because the implication of the sutra is not, if your partner says something and you get hurt, just let go of that. It's saying, when you get triggered and thoughts of desire, aversion, or ignorance arise, right, the three poisons, here are a few things you can do to let them go and not make things worse. On one level, very practically. And so this teaching, the teaching on emptiness never negates what we're going through. It does give us another very powerful way to look at what we experience, moment to moment to moment. And therefore give us other ways to respond that maybe we hadn't considered before. Right? So is that clear? And that's not a hypothetical question. Is that clear? Okay. So then let's get into the fourth sign. So, which is to trace the thoughts back to the roots. Now, suppose that a person is ignoring and forgetting about those thoughts, but bad, unskillful thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion keep coming up. They should focus on stopping the formation of those thoughts. This translation is by Bhante Sujatu. He's an Australian monk and teacher. He was ordained originally in the Thai Buddhist tradition, but now he considers himself part of of early Buddhism, which is also distinct from Theravada. There are some differences we don't have to get into, but so you could say an early Buddhist. And he has an interesting story. He heads a website called Sutta Central that was designed to give access to the early Buddhist texts in the original, and then in, I think it's 30 different languages of modern translations. But when he co-founded the site some years ago now, he couldn't get digital translations of the Pali Canon without copyright, I'm guessing in English. And so he decided to do them himself. And so he moved to an island. He moved to Chimay off the coast of Taiwan and lived there for 3 years and did this uninterruptedly. He translated the 4 collections, the 4 Nikayas of the Pali Canon into English. I'm assuming it was English. It didn't actually say that. I mean, it's a monumental job. He's also been very involved in the issue of bhikkhuni ordination in these early traditions, and a very outspoken critic of the top-down hierarchies that are kind of the norm in many Buddhist institutions. He says, they're dead weight. Get rid of them. And Buddhism would be much better off. Don't even reform them. Just get rid of them. So a very dynamic teacher. And his translations of the suttas are a little more accessible. So I thought it'd be good to use them. Also because they contain some very helpful notes And so that last sentence I quoted, they should focus, the practitioner who's working on these skillful signs, they should focus on stopping the formation of those thoughts. If they were not able to switch, they were not able to warn themselves about the danger, they were not able to ignore, to withdraw their attention from the thought, they turn to the next sign, which is to stop the formation of those thoughts. Another translation says to still the thought formation. And this is the sentence actually that gives the sutra its title. Thanissaro Bhikkhu calls it the relaxation of thoughts, which I like. Bhante Sujatu translated it as how to stop thinking, which is, of course, very catchy. If you see that, you would want to look at it, I think, if you're a practitioner. But I don't love it for reasons that I've already given. It's a little misleading. But relax into the thought. And then you can get a much better handle on it. You can work with it differently than if you are caught in the middle of it. You're in the swirl of it. And really think of all of these signs as that. They're allowing you, as I said earlier, to not get enmeshed in the content of the thought. So you can really work, in a sense, with the bare materials of what a thought is, what thinking is, what letting go is, what picking up is. And a thought formation is a mental formation, which you might recall from our study of the skandhas and of dependent origination, samskara. It's the fourth skandha before consciousness and the second of the 12 links after ignorance. And so here it refers to the energy that drives the formation of our thoughts. It's that impulse, that willful intent, that choice. One of the translations of samskara is choice or disposition. Remember that ignorance leads to the formation of these stories. And so when we understand that energy, we take away its power. Anger has energy, greed has energy, but so does mindfulness, so does concentration, so does wisdom. All of these are also samskara. And remember that when you're able to successfully apply any one of these signs, your mind settles, unifies, and becomes immersed in samadhi, concentration. That's what the sutra says. And so if you think about it, it's like this whole sutra is filling out that pithy instruction we give for zazen. See the thought, let it go, come back to the breath. But between seeing a thought and letting it go, there's a whole universe. The sutra is spelling out how to let go. And so in this sign, after switching, warning, ignoring, now we're taking it and tracing it back to its root. And in doing so, those bad thoughts are given up and come to an end, Bhante Sujatu says. They're given up and they come to an end. Well, what's the root of a thought? What is its source? And so the sutra says, suppose there was a person walking quickly. They think, why am I walking so quickly? Why don't I slow down? And so they slow down. Then they think, why am I walking slowly? Why don't I stand still? And they go ahead and stand still. Then they think, why am I standing still? What if I just sit down? What if I lie down? And then they lie down. And so that person would shun successively coarser postures and adopt more subtle ones. I don't know about shun, but they are going from coarse to subtle. See what's happening here? So a person walking quickly is like someone swamped by thoughts. And we all know what that feels like, right? They are swirling around in your head, moving too fast for you to track them. But we don't have to deal with all of them at once. We don't have to try to stop them, which would be a little bit like stopping a dam from overflowing. You do that with the next one, because that's the last resort sign. When you chop it at the base, at the root, it's like everything else failed. And then it is a little bit like, well, it's like cutting off the source of the water for that dam. But in this one, all we have to do is notice that we're swamped. Wait, why am I walking so fast? Why don't I walk slowly? Why don't I stand? Why don't I sit? Why don't I lie down? Gradually and increasingly quieting down my body. Just so with my mind. I'm thinking so much. Why am I thinking so much? Why don't I look at these thoughts? Why don't I slow down a little more and look at just one thought, a single thought? Why don't I look at what's behind that thought? Like, where did it come from? And here, it doesn't mean psychologically. It's not, when I was little, my mother didn't pay attention to me, and so now I'm anxious whenever someone doesn't respond to me right away. It really means looking like behind the thought, as it were, to see where it comes from. What is the root of a thought? Where does it come from when it appears? Where does it go when it goes? Of the 5 signs, this is the one that points most clearly to that symbiotic relationship between thought and thinker. Is the one that takes you to that place most directly. And the moment that you ask yourself, wait, why am I thinking so much? In that moment, you've already slowed down, right? Instead of rushing on to the next thought. And you keep slowing down a little more, until you get to the place of no thought. But you didn't get there by stopping the thinking. You got there by making your way back to the origin, where it loses its power. Because that energy that is so strong at the forefront of the thought, and that is usually so quick that you're already acting out the thought before you're even aware of it fully, right? Before you're even conscious of it fully. Often we're already acting it out. We're already responding. We're saying that thing that's going to hurt the other person. But in that place, that space behind the thought, that energy just dissipates. And then we can see a thought for what it is. It's something constructed. It's something made. Which means I can choose not to make it. Imagine that. I can choose not to think this thought. The end of the sutra has what Bhante Sujatu thinks is an addition, because the language is a little bit odd, and so he thinks it was added to the sutra. But basically, it says something like this, that the person who masters these signs can choose what to think and choose what not to think. They are the masters of their mind. And that sounds a little superhero-ish, but it's actually a very simple process when you get down to the brass tacks. It's like looking at this thought, and then you could even ask yourself, is this satisfying? Is this a satisfying thought that I'm having right now? And if it isn't, choosing one of these methods to put it down, at least for a little while. And that is how that work of liberation comes about. Sometimes it's not dramatic at all. Sometimes it really is just that putting down of that single thought. One of the things that's also happening as we work with these signs is that we're moving through time in our minds. Like we're doing a little bit of traveling in each of the times, the 3 times. And that's part of the power of these tools. It's like we're enlisting the past and the present and our future to help us get out of a tight spot. So when I switch a bad thought, to use Bhante Sujato's language, when I switch a bad thought with a good one, I'm moving horizontally in time. It's like I'm on a train, and the moment I see the railroad switch, I pull the lever and I just switch over to the other track. So it's parallel travel in the present. But when we warn ourselves of the danger of bad thoughts, we're traveling forward in time. We're anticipating the harm that will come if we keep going along this road. Kind of like, like you're looking at a map. Or, you're looking at Waze and you see a pile up ahead and you think, nope. And you just get off on the next exit, which is an incredible quality of the human mind, if you think about it. I can see where I'm going, even though I'm not there yet, based on where I've been. And I can decide to then go elsewhere. And all of that is happening now, in an instant. I mentioned this in a recent talk, but I didn't really do it justice. When I was reading An Immense World, the book by Ed Young on animal perception, I came upon a passage that was basically something like this, and it just blew my mind. He was explaining that when animals move, and that includes us, our sense organs have 2 kinds of information. The signals that are produced by the world, by the stuff that's happening out there, exafferents, and reafferents, the signals produced by my own movement, my own actions. And so if one of you moves and I see movement, that's exafferents that was happening out there in the world. But to see you, my eyes had to move slightly. And this sent patterns of light across my retinas. And that's the self-produced signal, reafferents. But then how do we know the difference between the two? How do I know when I see something, if it's that something is happening out in the world, or if it's that there's a signal that I'm getting from my senses? And the way that we know, actually, I guess the Buddhist answer would be that you don't. There's just movement. It all moves at once. Like that koan. A couple of monks are looking at a flag waving in the wind, and one of them says, it's the flag that's moving. And the other one says, no, it's the wind that's moving. And a nun is passing by, the sixth ancestor passes by and says, it's neither the wind nor the flag, it's your mind that's moving. And then a nun, whose name I can't remember, I don't know if it was given, says, it's neither the wind nor the flag nor your mind that's moving. But the physiological answer is perhaps even more incredible. Because if I understand correctly, what happens is when I decide to move, my nervous system sends a signal, a neural signal, telling my muscles what to do, like move your eyes to the right. But on the way from brain to muscle, that command is duplicated. It creates a copy. And then that copy heads to my senses, the eye, and simulates the consequences of the movement I plan to make. In other words, my eyes know what I'm going to see before I see it. How? Nobody fully understands. But then when the movement actually happens, my eyes have already predicted the signals that I'm about to experience. And so I compare the prediction with reality, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's my signal. That's my own signal. And that prepares me to see what I'm about to see. I mean, really? And all of this happens unconsciously and, of course, immediately. And, of course, philosophers have picked up on this, and they're like, well, this involves the will. It's like there's a copy of the will that goes ahead and reports back, or a copy of the soul. But, you know, for us, I think it sounds suspiciously like samskara, volitional formations. Like a t-shirt picking you based on what you've done in the past, or based on your history, based on your ancestry, based on your dispositions. When you're reaching for that t-shirt picked you a long time ago. And one commenter was saying about this fourth sign that it's like a process of reconstructing the train of thought. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say deconstructing, right? Because you trace ever more subtle kinds of energy until you get to no energy. And so you can also do this in a, I guess at a practical level. Because if I'm feeling snippy towards someone, if I'm feeling unkind, I can ask myself, what's behind that energy of ill will? Because every thought is conditioned by another thought. So it's really a chain. And so that feeling, lack of kindness, maybe it's because I'm envious of that person. And when I look at that envy, I see that behind it is fear, it's insecurity, a sense of inadequacy. And of course, that rests on my belief of an I, of a self that I need to prop up, that I need to protect, that I need to set forward and ensure is better than are the other selves I see. But when I see that this conceit is empty, then that mind naturally comes to rest. I mean, it's like, why am I going into all that trouble? Why am I going to all that trouble for something that's not even there in the way that I think it is? That happened to me in a very powerful way. You know, just this needing, I've told this story before, needing to be the first, needing to be the best. And essentially, without knowing about this sutra at all, one meditation period, I think, wait a second, why? Why do I need that? What's behind that need to be first? Oh, the thought that came was, I'm terrified to be ordinary. Why? Because then no one will remember me after I die. But you won't be there. Yeah, but I'm afraid. Really, what I'm afraid of is not existing. Well, you don't really exist in the way that you think you do. Oh, okay, so then what's the problem? And it shifted. That drive was, then I said, then I got worried. It's like, well, so if that ambition, which is how it manifested, if that's not there, then what's going to drive me? I was worried. I was a little worried. And then I thought, Zuisei, for God's sakes, I mean, you're a Buddhist. Liberation, of course, liberation. Now, clearly, this takes more energy than the previous signs. You do have to have the time and the willingness to get in there and patiently trace the thought back to its root. And so that is why it is best used during a period of meditation. Any period, certainly, but especially during longer retreats. Because then you have the time and the space and hopefully the inclination to corral your mind. And also because if there's something that you have been churning over, in that space, for the duration of the retreat, you're not going to do anything about it. You're not going to leave and go take care of it. So really, you can just be with it, both with the thoughts themselves, the content of the thought, and the energy. So you can really see them much more clearly. When we don't do this, we get dragged around. And we can do very little about it. You know, that teaching on the 8 worldly winds basically comes out of such a mind. It's dragged this way and that. Is like gain and loss, fame and disgrace, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. You just go from one to the. In Zen, the image of the ox being led by the nose ring is basically that. Huge beast, huge being, tiny, tiny little ring that just gets led around. And a mind like that, I mean, has nothing to anchor it. So whenever someone does something, says something that you don't like, you'll get angry or hurt or offended. Someone says something that you like, you rush to get close and to hold it, keep it. It's exhausting. It's exhausting and unnecessary. And so if the mind is a garden, you don't let it just get all choked up with weeds. You see a weed and you pull it so that the other plants have a place to grow. And I know at least one of you is going to say to me later, well, but isn't that discrimination? Bad thoughts, good thoughts. Plants are good, weeds are bad. I mean, on one level, every thought is made equal. And another level, we know there are thoughts that help and thoughts that harm. And so we're making room for the first, because those are the ones that are going to build the kind of world we actually want to live in. They're going to shape the kind of people we want to be. It's not someone else's job. Each and every one of us has to do that. And the wonderful thing is that we can. It's that we can.